All right. Hello, welcome to the MRP and MRS webinar hosted by me and Elizabeth. So here's some quick logistics before we get into our content for today. If you have a question at any point during the webinar, please raise your Zoom hand. You do not need to wait till the end to ask questions. We'll actually be doing a live demonstration of how to fill out the MRS. So it'll be most effective if you have any questions to ask during the webinar rather than at the end. And we will not be monitoring the chat during the presentation. So if you prefer to send a question to the chat, please do so at the end. All right, first to introduce myself. Hello, everyone. I'm Austin. I'm currently a fourth year at UC Berkeley, double majoring in economics and political economy, and I am this year's district member recognition and education chair. I was first the UC Berkeley Circle K club treasurer, and last term I was UC Berkeley Circle K's club membership development and education chair, and I was the executive assistant of the district MD&E committee. And a fun fact about myself is that I have two first names. My second first name is a Vietnamese first name. So first, we will talk about MRP. And in case you're not familiar with what that stands for, it stands for the Membership Recognition Program. So just a brief overview of what is MRP. It is the largest recognition program that we have in the CNH district, and it recognizes members who've shown dedication and consistent attendance to our three tenets of service, leadership, and fellowship. And in order to achieve an MRP ranking, members need to be dues pays, reach a specific number of service, leadership, and fellowship hours based on the level of their tenet, and also complete a specific number of additional requirements. So here on the left-hand side is a handy graphic breaking down all the different requirements and numbers expected for each tier of the membership recognition program. And this graphic was actually sent to all executive board members, as well as in the CNH Club Leadership Discord, if you're a club leader in that Discord. So feel free to download the graphic to promote to your own members. But if you do use a graphic, please remember to credit Jacqueline too, as I've done here on the slide. Our four tiers of the MRP program is bronze, silver, gold, and platinum. And so I will break down all these different requirements later on, but just to go over, in case you're not familiar with how MRP works, you first must complete the service, leadership, and fellowship hours requirements in order to accomplish a tier and be dues paid, as I just mentioned in the last slide. And everything below that dues paid row on the graphic, those are like options you have that you can strive to complete in order to meet MRP. And yes, as you can see, if you're first just start getting out with your term and club events are getting back up again as fall just started, as you can see for the bronze tier, you'll have to complete 30 service hours, 20 leadership hours, 15 fellowship hours, be a dues pay members, and then out of the 13 different requirements there are, you'll need to complete 4 of them in order to achieve the MRP tier. And so I will just go ahead and break down all these different additional requirements as well the tag definitions to help give you a better idea of what events count for what in order to count towards the MRP. So first, we have MD&E events tagged as MD. It's essentially just any event that helps with recruitment, retention, development, and education. Most commonly, it would be a workshop that you probably host at the club level or some type of family or mentor-mentee event, as that would help in regards with membership retention. Next is fundraisers tagged as FR. As you can see, for all 4 tiers, you only need to participate in 1 fundraiser and to complete that requirement. Basically what a fundraiser is that you're raising money for a club or a charitable organization. Next is alumni. So an alumni event is specifically an event that has 2 members from a Circle K club and 2 alumni members present, not just one. You need a minimum of 2 alumni. And yeah, and as you can see on the slide, you'll need you'll need to attend one alumni event in order to satisfy it for the bronze and silver categories, but for gold and platinum, you'll need to attend 2 alumni events. For Kiwanis family tagged as KF, specifically this event is 2 members from a Circle K club and 2 members from a non-Circle K Kiwanis family branch club. Most of the time, an event that would satisfy this would be like a Key to College event if your club hosts one, or attending a Kiwanis meeting of your sponsoring Kiwanis club. And then next, it is interclub or IN. So specifically for IN, it's a little bit complicated, but hopefully this slide breaks it down well enough for you to understand. So in order for an event to count as an interclub, there must be at least 2 members from any other Kiwanis family club, and this could also include Circle K. But the number of members from your own home club in order to count for it to be an IN varies based on the size of your home club. So for example, if your home club is 50 members or less, you need to have at least 2 members need to be present. For example, UC Berkeley is less than 50 members. And so in order for this event to count as interclub, there'll need to be at least 2 UC Berkeley members here. And I think I am the only UC Berkeley member here. So unfortunately, this event does not count as an interclub for me. But if you're in a club that has 51 through 90 members, you'll need at least 3 members present from your home club in order to count as an interclub. And if your club is 91 members and above, you'll need at least 4 members present in order for an event to count as an interclub. And then next up on MRP is divisional event and district event. So a divisional event is usually an event hosted by your division, and it's usually planned by your division's lieutenant governor and their appointed divisional leadership team. And then for district event, essentially any event hosted by and for the district. And unfortunately, these virtual district webinars do not receive the district event tag, and this is just something set by our district operating procedures. And for international hosted, tag as INT, essentially an event hosted by and held for all Circle K on the international level. One of the things that was changed about MRP for this year, so it used to be international event, but it was changed to international hosted. So basically, any event on the international level, whether it be international convention or like a virtual town hall that occasionally the international level will host, that will count towards international hosted for MRP. And next is media submitted. So essentially any media asset, like a video or a photo from an event that you submit at any club, any level of Circle K will count towards media submitted, and it does not need to be published or utilized in order for it to count. Next is webinars attended. Essentially, a webinar is a web workshop broadcasted online on any level of Circle K. And since you're all here right now, and if this is your first webinar that you attended, that means you just need 2 more webinars to attend in order to meet the bronze level of the MRP tier. Events chaired essentially means that you are the point designated person, contact person, the person in charge of planning an event in order for it to count towards MRP. For workshops and webinars hosted, this is when you take the lead to actually organize and the slides, the content, the activities for a workshop session or webinar, and it can be hosted essentially at any level of Circle K. If you're wondering how can you what are the opportunities for you to host a workshop or webinar. Fall training conference is coming up. There will also be district convention next spring in March of 2023. Those are 2 district events where you can apply to be a workshop host, and that would count towards MRP. Although if you were to be a workshop host at DCON, that will count towards 2023 through 2024 MRP and not this term. And lastly is committee member. Being involved in any committee on any level of Circle K will satisfy this. It does not have to be a district committee, and chairs of committees are also considered committee members. So you might be wondering, why should you care or put in the effort to earn an MRP tier? Well, first off, because the MRP program is a common standard across the entire district, it helps easily quantify your involvement in Circle K to other club members in the district, and especially if you are, and also your division as well, because especially if you're considering in the future running for a leadership position, listing and earning an MRP tier on your candidate statement or candidate literature will greatly boost your credibility in regards to running in an election. And also MRP can be a great tool to use for member retention. As you can tell by all the different tags that I just broke down, if a member was determined to earn an MRP tier, they'll be encouraged to attend a variety of events and not just like a social event or not just a service event. Because I'm sure that as club leaders, you might have experienced one person who would attend an event for a specific tenant and not necessarily another tenant. And lastly, if you were to earn an MRP tier, you will be recognized in front of the entire district. And one of my goals for this year is that MRP recipients will actually receive a paper certificate and possibly a small souvenir if you were to earn an MRP tier in front of the entire district at FTC or DCON. And if you're a club leader, you might be wondering, how would you encourage your club members to aim for a tier? First and foremost, I think the #1 way is to inform your members that the MRP tiers do exist by hosting like a club webinar or a club workshop about MRP. This webinar recording will actually be available on the CNA Circle K YouTube channel. So feel free to link to this YouTube video in your club's Discord server or in like an email newsletter to promote MRP. Whenever a member reaches an MRP tier, consider doing like some type of shout out or giving an incentive at a general meeting, or just posting them on social media to just congratulate them on their accomplishments. That will continue to raise more awareness of MRP and get members thinking about what they can do to also be recognized. If you're a club secretary and if you have the capacity to, you might be already familiar with the MRS. If you're not, we'll get into that just shortly. But if you have the capacity to, feel free to consider, if you have the capacity to, again, sending each member 1 or 2 times per semester or quarter, just telling them their progress on the MRP and what more they need for the next year. It's just about better help orient them towards the MRP tiers. If you're on a club executive board, one thing you could possibly consider is establishing an overall club goal for MRP, and just like presenting or posting some progress updates towards this goal at like a general meeting or on social media, or like, for example, if like X amount of members reach the bronze tier, maybe you could do something fun like pieing an officer if that is something you're comfortable with. And lastly, another idea is feel free to create an accountability partner system for those who want it, especially if like a member is aiming for gold and platinum. Going to all these different events in order to achieve the MRP tier might be tiring, but if they have an accountability partner, they'll be more encouraged to come out to the event. And yeah, those two people just keep them together and on track. So I just mentioned the previous slide about if you're a club secretary, potentially considering giving your members a copy of their individual MRS page. But I think an easier solution would be promoting these MRP tier progress trackers for your members. This was already sent out to all club executive board members and in the CNH club leadership Discord if you're a club leader. Well, these progress trackers made by recognition specialist Yash Chaudhary is a very easy Google spreadsheet for you to use and give out to your club members. Just make a copy of and just fill in their event attendance, and the Google Sheet will automatically tell you how close you are to achieving a tier. I won't actually demonstrate how to use it, as it is relatively straightforward and self-explanatory. And also, we'll be doing a live MRS demonstration, and that's probably already enough Excel and sheet files for you to look at for a webinar. All right, now I will pass it on to Elizabeth to talk to us about the MRS.
Thank you, Austin. Okay, so everybody can hear me all right?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Perfect. You're good. Okay. Thank you so much. So now we're starting with the MRS. So go ahead. Next slide, please, Austin. Alrighty, so a little bit about myself. My name is Elizabeth. I'm a third year at San Jose State University, majoring in mechanical engineering. And I currently serve as our on two district committees, District Member Recognition and Education Committee as our executive assistant, as well as on the Laws and Regulations Committee as a regular member. And then with my home club, I am serving as our club president and our acting secretary. And last term, I was our club secretary and received the Distinguished Secretary Award. And just a fun fact about me is that I was part of competitive robotics for 6 years. So, moving on. So what is the MRS? So the MRS is the Master Record Sheet, and it's a collection of all sorts of club events and hours by member. So if you are a secretary or familiar with the MRF, then you know that the MRF is by club event, and this just breaks it down by individual member attendance. And the MRS is primarily used for tracking different awards, particularly the MRP tiers that we were just talking about, as well as cataloging individual members hours per event. Next slide, please. Okay, so what are the deadlines? So we have a couple of different deadlines. We have soft deadlines and hard deadlines. So soft deadlines are just used to give you guys feedback on how you filled out your MRS. So that way you can get an idea of what you might need to change ahead of submitting for awards. And there will be two soft deadlines this term. One is next week, which is September 21st. And then the second one will be beginning of next year, January 10th. And then we have hard deadlines. And so hard deadlines are, as the name kind of implies, hard. You can't move them, you can't give any extensions. They are 24 hours after awards, the award deadlines are for the district. And so there will be two as well for these deadlines. The first is going to be October 15th, and that is after FTC awards are due, which was discussed in a previous webinar. And then the second one is February 20th in 2023. And that is immediately after DCON awards are due. And all of these submissions you're going to send directly to Austin, and they're due by 11:59 Pacific time. So if you're in Hawaii, unfortunately, you'll have to submit them by 8 p.m., but that's just the way it is, so we can make sure that everything is all set in order for the awards.
Oh, and yes. Oh, just a quick note before you move on, Elizabeth. I will, if you're a club secretary and a club president, I will be sending out an email very shortly about the next upcoming soft deadline.
Yes, perfect. Okay, and then, so now, what do you need when you're starting with the MRF? So you will need to have a club roster, preferably updated to include all dues paid members, and then a club events list. So if you are in charge of the MRS, but not a club secretary, then you'll need to gain that sort of list from your club secretary. but the MRF is definitely preferred for having the club events list. And then you'll need to have a full attendance per each event, including guests. That'll come important later. And you'll also need access to Microsoft Excel, not the Mac app from the App Store. So if you have a Mac or are not sure if you have access to Excel, double check with your school. I know that my school provides free software from Microsoft. And so look in to see if you can get a free software or a discount. But otherwise, you can always ask me to see if you need anything. I see we have a question. Yes, Riley.
Yes. Does it just need to be in the Excel format? I use Google Sheets a lot, and one of our members is a wizard with Excel. So, wizard with Google Sheets, not Excel. So I was wondering if that's fine. You just need the file format.
Right. So unfortunately, the MRS, the Master Record Sheet, has formulas on there that just aren't options on Google Sheets. And so particularly with the MRS, you have to have Excel. So if you don't have it on your personal computer, then I would highly recommend going to your school's resources or IT department, or even your college's Open Lab to see if they have a computer with Excel that you can borrow just so you can fill out the MRS. The file types just don't line up. If you try and open it on Google Sheets, you actually might end up crashing your computer if you try and open it on Google Sheets. So unfortunately, no, this is not something that you can just easily convert onto Google Sheets. But that being said, district secretaries were provided with or the district secretary did provide us with an option of a sort of version of this document on Google Sheets, but it doesn't have all the same capabilities as this Excel file. So that's just something to be aware of with that. And then getting back to the last thing that you'll need will be the latest version of the MRS user guide. And so the 2022-2023 version is coming out very soon, and I'll make sure to send it out to you all by the first hard deadline. But I will say that the last version that is currently on the website is still very accurate. So that is also very helpful. And much of what you're about to see in this demonstration is from that document. So hopefully that helps you if for some reason you end up losing track of this recording at some point. Next slide. Okay, now over to the live demonstration. So if Austin will pause his screen sharing for a bit, I can pull up the MRS for all of you. Alrighty, can everybody see it?
Oh yeah, we can see your screen a little bit.
Perfect, okay. So this is the MRS, and we're gonna go ahead and get started on some of the basic stuff for setting it up. Oops, sorry, that's a little too zoomed in. To start with, you're going to want to have, implement all of your events lists. And so here I have data that's from an old MRS file. And so if you're a club secretary or a person who's been in charge of the MRS and you've been keeping track of your events on a previous version of the MRS, it's super easy to transfer over data. So you would want to start with the dates and then to just copy over the dates and then paste them. Super simple. So I'm just going to use a keyboard shortcut here. I'm going to select the first date and then hold shift and come down here to the last date that I have available on the MRS, and then just copy it over and then go back to my new version of the MRS, and then I'll paste it right here. Sorry, forgot about that. Go ahead and in order to protect some of the formulas, the current version of the MRS has a protected sheet. So down here on the bottom where it says events, you just right click on it and then go to unprotect the sheet. And now you can start working with it to copy over your information. So I'll go ahead and, sorry. Let's go back here and copy this information, and then we'll go ahead and paste it right here. And so now our dates have populated. I realize that the dates are old, but we'll just go with that for the purposes of this demonstration. And now we can go back and get the information from our the names of our events. And so it's the same thing as with copying the dates. You're going to select all of the dates, and my keyboard shortcut is just to select the one, hold Shift, and then select the bottom one, and it selects all of them. And Control C for Windows. I know it's Command C on Mac, I believe. And then go back here, and now we can just paste in all of the dates. And so now it should populate like this. You'll notice that everything turns, that everything starts being kind of bold, but that is just because you haven't inputted any of the other information. However, one thing I want to point out here is make sure that you don't touch this column where members attended. This will be pre-populated based off of how many dues paid members you have. So say you have an event towards the beginning of the semester when recruitment really starts, and you have a whole bunch of new members and not all of them are dues paid. You can technically put them into the MRS, but you won't have them counted as part of the attendance. So whereas on the MRF, you might have numbers to include both dues paid and non-dues paid members, the MRS is strictly dues paid members. So there might be a discrepancy there that you should be aware of, but that's totally fine as long as you have indicated which one of your members are dues paid. Okay, now we're going to go over and get the tags to start. Okay. So now, if you're using the version from 2020, 2021 or in 2020, yeah, 2021 version or sooner, then you don't have to worry because there's a service tag that was added during that term. However, if you're using an even earlier version, then just be careful when you're transferring over the tags because there's another column here that didn't exist with those versions of the MRS. So in this case, I'm good to go. So I can just select all of the data here for my tags for my different events and just copy it over and then paste. Now we're set. I'm sorry, I don't know what happened with the screen, but now we have our tags for our events, and you'll notice that some of these events started to change color, and those different colors correspond to a particular tag that relates to awards. So you can also double check with the MRS guide for that. Now we should be ready to go to start inputting our members and our hours. So with similarly to the member attendance, don't input anything here. The MRS will automatically calculate the amount of hours per tenant based off of what you input for hours under each individual member. So if you notice that there's some numbers off, again, because of non-dues paid members, then that's okay. These are strictly the hours per tenant of each based off of your dues paid membership. Okay, so now that I've copied over my events, I'm just going to go ahead and protect the sheet so that way I don't corrupt any sorts of formulas, and it'll just give you a pop-up window here. You don't need to input a password and just click OK, and it'll automatically shelter all of the cells that have the protection on them. Okay. So now I want to input my members. And so I have a list of members from a previous term that are continuing. And so I'm just going to go over here and snag their names. So we've got John Adam and Wilbert and so on and so forth. So just to make it a little easier, I can copy and paste, but I'm going to go ahead and just manually type in just a few of the members, not everybody. And these, you should try and have your members alphabetically by last name. So if you add in members at the during some part of the semester, say after recruitment or in spring when you have transfer students, the MRS user guide will be able to show you how you can move around members on the sheets. So that way you can make sure that everything is in order as far as your records. So we had Adam, John, and he was a dues paid member, and we're going to say he is still a dues paid member. And so to indicate these ones that have the X's, you can just click on them and then it should prompt you with a drop-down menu, and then you can just click to activate each individual one. And so here, these two are some of those tags or events that Austin was talking about. And so the second one, workshop host, is the WH. And so that's where if you've hosted a workshop at a district or club level or a division level, then you would input just the number of workshops that you've hosted. And media submitted, similarly, you just input the number that you've hosted. So we'll go over here and we'll also input Mr. Wilbert into our sheet. And just for the sake of demonstration, I'm going to say he was dues paid last term. That's what this box is, but he wasn't dues paid for this term. Just to show you what happens when you compare it with members and without dues paid members. And so now you're ready to input the information about their hours. And so if we go back here, again, super simple to input the data based off of in previous records. You can just select the data that you've already collected and then copy it. Let's see if it go over here and just paste it straight to the part that you want. And this can work for any size cells. So if you say you don't remember exactly how many hours somebody has, or if they attended all of these events, as long as you select the same starting point on Excel and you hit paste, it'll automatically fill to the spot that you had it originally. And so now, if we go over here, the MRS has automatically calculated how many hours per tenant per event. And so we can watch to see that with this example, only one member is counted because only one member is due paid for this term. But as soon as, say, Will decides, oh yeah, I have the money to pay my dues and I want to be on MRP. So then you can go here and change it. And then the MRS should automatically change with it. There we go. Okay, took a minute, but see, now the number has changed to reflect the change in dues paid members. And so now we have all of these events, but we have a couple, we need to just designate who was a host for a particular event. So with any event that has the club hosted tag, which is over here on the far right, then you need to have an event chair. So in this case, since there's only the two members, you would go over here to where it says event chair, and it'll just drop down to show you the two members that are listed. But for your club's MRS, it'll show all the members that you have listed here at the top under this drop-down menu. And then you can just select here and it'll populate with the number of chairs that you have at the top. Now, say you have an event where it's not directly hosted by your club, but you still are the ones coordinating it. Then you could, for example, this marathon service, then you can still have an event chair. And so then you would just do the same thing. But any events that you aren't directly hosting in your club, you don't necessarily have to have an event chair for that event. Alrighty. So that's the main page of the MRS. Moving on to the Interclubs tab. Over here, you'll be able to input information about each individual Interclub tag. So as Austin was saying, any event where you have at least, for minimum, 2 members from your home club and 2 members from another club present, then you can count it as an Interclub. And so here we have a handy little button for you to use. And upon the release of the current MRS, I realized that there is an error with this page. And so you might not be able to pull from the data as with the button right away. However, I am working to release the user guide with a patch for you, so that way you are able to utilize this button and make your life a bit easier when filling out that MRS. So now we have all of these events here, and every single event in here we want to be able to pull over to this tab. And so I'm just going to go ahead and say, pull the data, and it automatically starts populating the events that are tagged with the interclub. Slowly but surely. And I apologize if my video keeps going in and out. It takes a lot of manpower for this document. But now we're ready to start implementing some of our information here. And this is where the attendance comes in handy. So the miles traveled is for your use. Obviously, since we're still sort of in a hybrid environment, you might not necessarily have traveled miles for certain events. So what I did during my term as secretary is if there was any event that was virtual, I went ahead and just put not applicable for the miles traveled. But if you have traveled a specific number of events to reach an event, make sure you put that in. And that should also be listed on the SURF if your club is collecting SURFs. But for every single event that there's an interclub, you need to list the number of Kiwanis family members that were present. So that could be Circle K in the green column or in Kiwanis family in the blue column. So let's say that this event we partnered with a sponsor Kiwanis, and this university we'll call, sorry, I forgot to input the university, but we'll say that Circle K University is sponsored by Kiwanis Club Kiwanis. And so in order to implement the number of members that you have, then you would just put the format as is listed at the top of the column. So if there were 5 Kiwanis members who came and they were from Kiwanis Club Kiwanis, then I would put 5 / Kiwanis Club Kiwanis. And that works. And then for this one, Circle K at XX University, we're going to assume that the event was hosted by them, and so their members were present. And to input that, you would just say they had 20 members present at their general meeting. And you would just say 20, and then you would say XX University Circle K. And so you would do this for the rest of the interclubs that you have. If in the event that you have a new interclub that, say you forgot 1 month, but you are notified from the district secretary that your event is missing on this page, or we tell you that, oh, we noticed an event missing, could you input that? Then you would have to make sure that when you update your interclubs tab, that the listings for the attendance based off of the interclub is corresponding to the appropriate event. I know that last term when I was doing the MRS, I had a few events where I had to shift the attendance down a little bit to compensate for having the new members or the new events added to the list. All right. And before I get too far away from myself, I'm going to go back here and name the school. So at the top over here, this is where you would input your school's name. And when you're inputting the name of schools, please make sure to try and use the full name of the school. The only acceptable abbreviations on this document are CSU, UC, UN, or UH. So try and make sure that the name of schools listed is under the full name or including those abbreviations. So in this case, we're attending Circle K University. So I'm just going to quickly input Circle K University. And now that name will populate throughout the rest of the document. So now if we go back here, Circle K University. So now that we've inputted all of our information as far as interclubs and events, let's say we want to check up on our members. So that's down here under the members sheet. And here is the magical place that I love in the MRS, because it shows you exactly what your members are doing and what's their progress towards MRP status. So over here on this side, you can see exactly which level your members have achieved as far as MRP, and then how many hours per tenant that they have yet to reach for the next level. And this column over here, requirements met, is the additional requirements. And so just as a reminder, it's not in such a nicely laid out graphic as Janet or Jacqueline created for us, but we have the hours requirements listed here as well, just to remind you, and so that the MRS is able to populate it, the information for you. And so if your members are asking for MRP status, I find this to be the most useful because you can directly tell them, oh, you have X amount of hours of fellowship left, or you have Y amount of hours for leadership left in order to achieve MRP status. But say that an individual member decides, oh, I need to know exactly how many hours I've done or which events that I've attended. You can go over to the individual members tab, and then up here where it says member, there should be a blank box that you can select, and you'll have a drop-down menu. And from here, you can select a member that you want to show off or that you wish to look up. And then as soon as you select that member, a whole bunch of information populates. So every single event that they populate, that they have attended and or chaired will show up here. And then the additional requirements, including if they are dues paid or which, how many webinars they have attended and so forth, that is also on this page as well. And this page is what people will need for individual awards. So these are very important during DCON. And if you want to make sure that they get their attendance, what you can do is when you're active on this page with their name present, go over up to the top on the cell to where it says file. And then you're going to go to save as. And then you're going to go ahead and save as a PDF. This is embarrassing. There, okay, PDF. And so this should make sure to populate the sheet that is active as a PDF file. And that'll be used as your attendance that they need to submit for individual awards. And that is the end of what I wanted to cover with my live demonstration. I realized that was a lot of information at once. So are there any questions while I'm still here at the MRS? Okay. Yes, Alex.
Hi, hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, so I was a secretary last year. The problem that I have for the MRS from last year is when I try to move a member before the other members. For example, I like to move Brett Will before Adam Johns. When I cut the whole sections that I insert is before Adam Johns, the number on the top is the 0 instead of 1. Is there any way I can avoid that?
So, interesting. What you can do is manually go in here and change the formula. I realize that's not a good answer. So when you're moving over the members, in the MRS user guide, it explains to try and make sure that you're cutting and pasting in between members, but I realize that's difficult if you say have a member who has a last name that starts with AAA. That's going to be impossible to implement them into the middle of the pack when they're at the beginning. So what you can just do instead is just manually input 1 just to correct it. And the way to do that, again, is to just go down here, right click on where it says events, unprotect the sheet, and then you're able to manually update the formula to be just a number. So that way it will always be 1 regardless of where you move that person. I realized that if you end up needing to move them again, you'll have to change the number again. But the quick fix, that's a quick fix for you without having to worry about adjusting where people are referenced in terms of the formulas. You can also always reach out to Austin and myself, so that way we can look at your document directly and correct it if that becomes an issue again.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? For right now. Okay. Since I don't see any, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing and send it back to Austin to go to slide 29, I think it is. Oh, sorry, 30. Go to slide 30, please. Okay, perfect. So the last thing is just a reminder about the MRS user guide. And so this will be released very soon, and it has tons of information for you. So say you are looking to add members like Alex was mentioning, or you have transfer students and you need to manage their hours from 2 different schools, or you just want to have more detailed, in-depth tricks and tips about how to use Excel, that information is all compiled in the master record sheet. And all of that information is already on the current released master records user guide, sorry. So that is there to help you already. There are just a few more things that I need to add to the current one, so that way it's all crisp and clean for you to use and help out with the current MRS.
All right, so we're reaching the end of the webinar. So just to quickly recap our upcoming webinars. So on September 22nd, we'll actually have a fall training conference webinar hosted by our newly appointed FTC chair, Ann Lee. She'll go over just registration logistics and also just preview the FTC event itself, so that way you can all get a better idea of how to register for the event and what to expect at FTC. And as you can see on the slide, on September 24th at 6 p.m., our district technology chair, Christina Nguyen, will actually be hosting a webinar about how to create or improve your club's website. Hopefully this webinar will be a good use and helping you improve your digital presence. And yeah, well, that is the end of the webinar. Thank you all so much for coming out tonight and staying attentive throughout. I do recognize that this was a little bit slow, but we just wanted to make sure that you all got the correct information when it came to the MRP and MRS. And so now we are ready to take any questions that are needed.
Yes, I kind of have a relevant question. It's tangentially related. What are the benefits for the bronze, silver, gold, platinum awards for our members in the club? Because it seems that those rewards are given on a member basis. Am I understanding that right? Or is that on a club basis?
Oh, I'm sorry. Whoever asked that question, I'm not entirely sure if I understood that correctly. Would you mind restating it again?
I think there was mention about a bronze, silver, gold, and platinum level for membership reward awards. Was I misunderstanding that?
Oh, yes. So if a member were to earn an MRP tier at Fall Training Conference or District Convention in March of 2023, if they're a recipient of the tier, they will actually be recognized in front of the entire district, and they'll be issued a paper certificate and a pin.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Seeing as there are no further questions at this time, we'll go ahead and end the webinar and stop the recording. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching and coming out. and have a nice day.